She wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't supposed to win. And she definitely wasn't supposed to make the most powerful duke in England fall to his knees in front of 300 witnesses. But Clara Whitlock did all three, and it nearly got her killed. This is the story of a woman who walked into a world that wanted her gone, played a game designed to destroy her, and gambled everything on one impossible move. If you want to know how a chess match became a war, how pride became poison, and how the girl they laughed at rewrote every rule they swore could never be broken, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. Let's begin. The Grand Hall of Westminster smelled like tobacco, old leather, and the kind of arrogance only men with inherited titles could afford. Chandeliers hung low over marble floors, their candlelight catching the glint of gold watches and polished boots. Around 24 tables sat England's finest minds, lords, barons, military officers, and one visiting count from Prussia, all gathered for the most prestigious chess tournament the country had ever seen, not a single woman among them. Until now. Clara Whitlock adjusted the brim of her hat and kept her eyes down as she walked through the gilded doors. Her heart hammered in her chest, but her hands were steady. She'd practiced this entrance 100 times in her mind. Walk like you belong, speak only when necessary, and whatever you do, don't let them see you sweat. She wore a man's coat, tailored, dark, and slightly too large. Her hair was pinned tight beneath a cap, and a thin pair of spectacles obscured half her face. On paper, she was C.W. Locke, a promising young player from the countryside with a modest reputation, and a letter of recommendation from a retired colonel who didn't exist. No one questioned it. No one had reason to. She moved toward the registration table, where a clerk with thinning hair and ink-stained fingers barely glanced up. Name? C.W. Locke. He scanned the list, nodded, and handed her a card with her table assignment. Table 14, first match begins in 20 minutes. Don't be late. Clara took the card and exhaled slowly. She was in. Around her, men laughed and shook hands, their voices booming with confidence. They spoke of strategies, past victories, and the prize money waiting at the end of the week. Some were here for glory, others for status. A few just wanted to prove they were the smartest man in the room. Clara wanted something simpler. She wanted to play. For as long as she could remember, chess had been her escape. While her mother planned dinner parties and her father discussed politics over brandy, Clara would slip into the library and study openings, endgames, sacrifices. Her older brother Thomas had taught her the basics when she was 6, thinking it a harmless pastime. By the time she was 10, she was beating him regularly. By 15, she'd memorized entire games from the masters, Philidor, Greco, Ruy Lopez. But women didn't play chess, not publicly, not seriously, and certainly not in tournaments where the winner walked away with 300 pounds and a title match against the reigning national champion. So Clara had done what any reasonable person in her position would do. She'd lied. She found table 14 near the back corner of the hall, a small mercy. The fewer eyes on her, the better. Her opponent arrived moments later, a heavy-set man in his 50s with a florid face and the unmistakable scent of gin on his breath. "Locke, is it?" he said, settling into his chair with a grunt. "Yes, sir." You look young." "I am, sir." "First tournament?" "Yes, sir." He waved a dismissive hand. "Don't worry, you'll learn. Everyone loses their first match. It's tradition." Clara said nothing. She simply set up her pieces with calm precision, black on her side, white on his. The man, Lord something or other, she hadn't caught the name, opened with a lazy pawn to a 4. Standard. Predictable. Clara responded with the Sicilian defense, and his eyebrows rose slightly. Ah, ambitious. The game progressed quickly. He played with the confidence of someone who'd never been seriously challenged outside his club. Clara played with the quiet focus of someone who'd spent years preparing for this exact moment. By move 12, she had control of the center. By move 18, his queen was trapped. By move 23, he resigned. He stared at the board for a long moment, then looked up at her with something between surprise and irritation. "Well," he muttered, "beginner's luck." Clara nodded politely and said nothing, but inside, she was smiling. The first day of the tournament passed in a blur. Clara won her second match, then her third. By the time the hall began to empty that evening, whispers were starting to spread. Who's the kid at table 14? Locke. Came out of nowhere. Heard he beat Morrison in under 30 moves. Morrison's a drunk. Still, Clara kept her head down and left before anyone could start asking questions. She walked the long way back to the boarding house where she was staying under her false name, her coat pulled tight against the evening chill. London in October was gray and damp, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones and refused to leave. When she finally reached her small rented room, she locked the door, pulled off the hat and spectacles, and let her hair fall loose. For the first time all day, she let herself breathe. She'd done it. 1 day down. 6 more to go. The second day brought harder matches. Clara faced a retired military captain who played with mechanical precision, a young viscount who favored aggressive attacks, and an Oxford professor who tried to lecture her on strategy between moves. She beat all 3. By the third day, people were paying attention. Who is this Locke fellow? Never heard of him before this week. Doesn't matter. Did you see what he did to Hartley's knight fork? Brilliant. Clara kept her answers short, her demeanor humble. She let them believe what they wanted to believe, that she was just a quiet, unremarkable young man with a knack for the game. But on the 4th day, everything changed. Adrian Blackmore entered the hall like a storm rolling in off the Thames. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair, sharp features, and the kind of presence that made people step aside without realizing they'd done it. He wore a perfectly tailored coat, a silk cravat, and an expression that suggested he found most of the room beneath his notice. The Duke of Ashford, 28 years old, undefeated in tournament play for 3 consecutive years, rumored to have beaten a Russian grandmaster in an exhibition match in Paris. Wealthy, titled, brilliant, and by all accounts utterly insufferable. Clara had read about him. She'd studied his games. She knew his style, aggressive, relentless, and brutally efficient. He didn't just beat opponents, he dismantled them. And he was her next match. The pairings were announced at midday, and the moment Clara saw her name next to his, her stomach dropped. Table 1, the clerk said. Front and center. His Grace requested it personally. Of course he did. Table 1 sat directly beneath the largest chandelier in the hall, visible from every angle. It was where the crowd gathered, where reputations were made or destroyed. Clara walked to the table with her head high and her hands steady, even though her pulse was racing. Adrian was already seated, studying the board with a faint smirk on his lips. When she sat down across from him, he looked up, and for a moment his eyes lingered on her face. Locke, he said, his voice smooth and faintly amused. The prodigy. Your Grace. I've been hearing quite a bit about you. I'm honored. Don't be. Most of it's speculation. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. They say you came out of nowhere. No known club affiliation. No documented matches. Just appeared. Clara met his gaze evenly. I prefer to let my play speak for itself. His smirk widened. How very modest. The match began. Adrian opened with the King's Gambit, a bold, romantic opening that had fallen out of favor among modern players. It was risky, aggressive, exactly what she'd expected from him. Clara declined the gambit and steered the game into quieter waters. She knew she couldn't outmuscle him in a tactical brawl, so she played for position, for patience, for the long game. The crowd grew around them. Whispers filled the air. Men leaned in, watching every move. Adrian played beautifully. His attacks were sharp, his sacrifices calculated. But Clara didn't flinch. She defended when she needed to, countered when she could, and slowly, methodically, she began to turn the position in her favor. By move 30, the game was equal. By move 40, she had a slight advantage. By move 50, Adrian's smirk had vanished. He stared at the board, his jaw tight. For the first time all week, Clara saw something flicker across his face, something that looked almost like respect. Then he moved his queen. It was a trap, a beautiful, vicious trap designed to lure her into overextending. If she took the bait, she'd lose her rook and the game within 5 moves. Clara saw it immediately. And she also saw the counter. She moved her bishop. Adrian blinked. Then, slowly, he began to smile. Remarkable, he murmured. 3 moves later, he offered his hand. I resign. The hall erupted. Men shouted in disbelief. Others leaned over the board, trying to understand what had just happened. A few even applauded, reluctantly, but genuinely. Clara shook his hand, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. Adrian held her grip a moment longer than necessary, his dark eyes studying her with unsettling intensity. "You're not what you seem," he said quietly. Clara pulled her hand back. "Neither are you, Your Grace." He laughed, a low, genuine sound that sent a shiver down her spine. "Touché." See, that night Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the match over and over in her mind. She'd beaten him. She'd actually beaten the Duke of Ashford in front of half of London's elite. It should have felt like triumph. Instead, it felt like she'd just painted a target on her back. The next morning, the whispers turned into murmurs. By afternoon, they were open conversations. Who is this Locke? Where did he train? Why haven't we seen him before? Clara tried to stay invisible, but it was getting harder. People watched her now, studied her. A few even tried to strike up conversations, which she deflected with polite brevity. But Adrian Blackmore wasn't so easily avoided. He found her in the corridor outside the hall just before her next match, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed and that same infuriating smirk on his face. "Locke," Clara stopped. "Your Grace, I've been thinking about our game." "Have you?" "I have." He pushed off the wall and stepped closer, his gaze sharp. "And I've come to a conclusion." "Which is?" "You're hiding something." Clara's blood went cold, but she kept her face neutral. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Aren't you?" He tilted his head, studying her like a puzzle he was determined to solve. "You play like someone who's been training for years. Decades, even. But there's no record of you, no club, no mentor, no matches." He paused. "It's almost like you don't exist. Perhaps I simply value my privacy. Or perhaps," he said softly, "you're not who you claim to be." For a long, tense moment, they stared at each other. Then Adrian smiled, slow and dangerous. "Don't worry," he said. "Your secret's safe with me. For now." He turned and walked away, leaving Clara standing in the corridor with her heart in her throat. That evening, after her next victory, Clara returned to her boarding house to find a note slipped under her door. The handwriting was elegant, precise. "Dinner tomorrow, 8 o'clock, the Ivy Club. Come alone. A.B." Clara crumpled the note in her fist. She should ignore it. She should stay as far away from Adrian Blackmore as possible. But she also knew that if she didn't show up, he'd only become more curious. And curiosity, in a man like him, was dangerous. So the next night, Clara put on her best coat, adjusted her hat, and walked into the most exclusive gentlemen's club in London. Adrian was waiting for her at a corner table, a glass of wine in hand and that same unreadable expression on his face. "Locke," he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. "Sit." Clara sat. "You came." "You didn't give me much choice," he smiled. "Fair enough." He poured her a glass of wine and slid it across the table. "Relax. I'm not going to expose you." "Then what do you want?" "To talk." "About?" "Chess, strategy, the tournament." He leaned back, swirling his wine. "And why someone as talented as you would risk everything to play in a competition you're not even supposed to be part of." Clara's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it slowly and placed it on the table between them. It was a guest list from a society ball 3 months ago. And there, halfway down, was a name. Miss Clara Whitlock. Clara's heart stopped. Adrian's smile didn't waver. "You're quite good at disguises. I'll give you that. But you made one mistake." "What mistake?" "You played the Whitlock variation in our match. It's named after your brother, isn't it? Thomas Whitlock. Used to play at the Oxford Club before he gave it up for politics." He tapped the paper. "He taught you, didn't he?" Clara said nothing. Adrian leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I'm not your enemy, Miss Whitlock, but if you want to survive this tournament, if you want to finish what you started, you're going to need an ally." "And you're offering?" "I am." "Why?" For the first time, his smirk faded. He looked at her with something that might have been honesty. Because I've never met anyone who plays like you, and I'll be damned if I let them destroy you before I get a rematch. Clara stared at him, weighing her options. Then, slowly, she picked up her wine glass. One condition. Name it. You don't tell anyone, not until the tournament is over. Adrian raised his own glass. Deal. They clinked glasses. And in that moment, Clara knew, for better or worse, that everything had just changed. The alliance should have made things easier. It didn't. Clara left the Ivy Club that night with Adrian's promise ringing in her ears and a knot of unease coiling in her stomach. She'd traded one risk for another, exposure for complicity. The Duke of Ashford now knew exactly who she was. And while he claimed to be an ally, Clara had learned long ago that powerful men rarely did anything without expecting something in return. The question was, what did Adrian Blackmore want? She didn't have time to figure it out. The tournament was entering its critical phase. Only 16 players remained, and every match now carried weight. One loss meant elimination. One mistake meant going home empty-handed. Clara couldn't afford either. Her next opponent was Sir Edmund Graves, a retired naval officer with a reputation for suffocating positional play. He was methodical, patient, and utterly humorless. The kind of man who treated chess like naval warfare, grinding down his opponents through attrition rather than brilliance. The match took 4 hours. Clara won by a single pawn in the endgame, her hand trembling slightly as she reached across the board to shake his. Sir Edmund's grip was cold and brief. "You're lucky," he said flatly. "Perhaps," Clara replied, though they both knew luck had nothing to do with it. As she stood to leave, she caught Adrian's eye from across the hall. He was seated at table 3, mid-game against a florid-faced baron, but he glanced up just long enough to give her the faintest nod. She didn't return it. That night, back in her cramped boarding house room, Clara tried to sleep but couldn't. Every creak of the floorboards made her flinch. Every shadow on the wall felt like a threat. She'd spent the last 5 days pretending to be someone she wasn't, and the strain was beginning to show. Her hand shook when she poured water from the pitcher. Her reflection in the small mirror looked pale, gaunt. She couldn't keep this up much longer, but she also couldn't stop now. The next morning brought a new problem. Clara arrived at the hall early, hoping to avoid the growing crowds, but instead found herself cornered near the registration desk by a heavy-set man in an expensive coat. His name was Lord Pemberton, and he was one of the tournament's primary sponsors, a textile magnate with more money than manners. "Locke," he boomed, clapping a meaty hand on her shoulder. "Heard you've been making quite a name for yourself." Clara forced a polite smile. "I'm doing my best, sir." "Modest, I like that." He leaned in closer, his breath reeking of tobacco. "Tell me, boy, where'd you learn to play like that? Oxford? Cambridge?" "Self-taught, mostly." "Self-taught," he laughed, though it sounded more like a bark. "Remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. You know, I've got a nephew about your age. Bright lad. Terrible at chess, though. Maybe you could give him some lessons after all this is done, eh?" "Perhaps, sir." "Splendid!" He clapped her shoulder again, hard enough to make her wince. "You keep winning, and we'll talk business. I've got friends in Parliament who'd love to meet a prodigy like you." Clara nodded, her jaw tight, and extracted herself from the conversation as quickly as she could. As she walked away, she felt Pemberton's eyes lingering on her back. She was drawing too much attention, and attention, in her position, was poison. The tournament organizers announced the quarterfinal pairings at noon. Clara's stomach dropped when she saw her name. Table 1. Again. But this time her opponent wasn't Adrian. It was Lord Vincent Caro. Clara knew the name. Everyone did. Caro was old money. Third-generation peerage, educated at Eton, a fixture in London's most exclusive clubs. He was 42, silver-haired, and possessed the kind of casual cruelty that came from never being told no. He was also a decent chess player. Not brilliant, but solid, experienced, dangerous in his own way. But what made Clara's blood run cold wasn't his skill. It was his reputation. Vincent Caro hated women, not in the dismissive, patronizing way most men of his class did. Caro's hatred was active, deliberate. He'd publicly opposed women's suffrage, written op-eds arguing against female education, and once famously had a maid dismissed for daring to correct him on a matter of household accounts. If he discovered who she really was, he wouldn't just expose her. He'd destroy her. The match began at 2 o'clock. Caro arrived late, strolling to the table with an air of boredom, as if the entire affair were beneath him. He sat down without acknowledging Clara, set up his pieces with practiced efficiency, and opened with pawn to d4. The queen's pawn opening. Conservative. Controlling. Clara responded with the Indian defense, a sharp, flexible system designed to undermine White's central control. It was a risky choice against a player like Caro, but Clara needed to take him out of his comfort zone early. The game progressed slowly. Caro played with the mechanical precision of someone who'd memorized openings and middle game plans but lacked true creativity. Clara countered with quiet aggression, probing for weaknesses, testing his defenses. By move 20, the position was balanced but tense. By move 30, Clara had a slight edge, a better pawn structure, more active pieces. Caro noticed. His jaw tightened. He began to play faster, more carelessly, trying to complicate the position and throw her off balance. Clara didn't bite. She kept her focus, calculated her responses, and slowly tightened the noose. Then, on move 38, Caro made a mistake. It was subtle. A knight moved to the wrong square, leaving his king exposed for just one tempo. But it was enough. Clara's heart raced as she calculated the combination. If she was right, she could force checkmate in 7 moves. If she was wrong, she'd lose her queen. She moved her bishop. Caro frowned, studying the board. Then his frown deepened. He reached for his knight, hesitated, pulled his hand back. The crowd around them had grown silent. Caro moved his rook. Clara moved her queen. Caro's face went pale. "Check," Clara said softly. 3 moves later, it was over. Caro stared at the board, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. For a moment, Clara thought he might overturn the pieces, but instead he stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. "This is absurd," he said loudly, his voice cutting through the hall. "This boy is a fraud." Every conversation stopped. Clara's blood turned to ice. Caro pointed at her, his face flushed with anger. "I demand an investigation. No one plays like this without formal training. No one. He's cheating." "I'm not," Clara began, but Caro cut her off. "He must have had assistance, a hidden partner perhaps, or access to a chess engine." "There are no chess engines," someone in the crowd muttered. "Then he's memorized games, stolen strategies." Caro's voice rose to a shout. "I will not be humiliated by some nobody from the countryside." Clara stood slowly, her hands trembling. "I won fairly, Lord Caro." You won nothing." He turned to the tournament officials standing nearby. "I demand a review of this match, and I demand to know who this boy really is, his credentials, his sponsors, everything." One of the officials, a thin man with spectacles, stepped forward nervously. "My lord, we've reviewed Mr. Locke's registration. Everything is in order." "Then review it again." Caro slammed his fist on the table. "This is unacceptable." "Careful, Caro." The voice came from behind Clara, low and sharp. Adrian Blackmore stepped out of the crowd, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "You're embarrassing yourself," Adrian continued, his tone almost bored. Caro's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "Stay out of this, Ashford." "I don't think I will." Adrian moved closer, standing just beside Clara, not quite in front of her, but close enough to make his position clear. "You lost a chess match. It happens. Accept it with grace and move on." "He cheated." "He didn't." Adrian's voice hardened. "I've played him myself. He's brilliant. Better than you, certainly. And your accusation is nothing more than wounded pride dressed up as principle." Caro's hands clenched into fists. "You would defend him, wouldn't you? Always the rebel. Always undermining tradition." "Tradition?" Adrian laughed, cold and sharp. "Is that what we're calling it now? You're not defending tradition, Caro. You're defending mediocrity, and frankly, it's pathetic." The hall went deadly silent. Caro took a step toward Adrian, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Watch yourself, Ashford. Title or not, you're not untouchable." Adrian smiled. "Neither are you." For a long, tense moment, the two men stared at each other. Then Caro turned on his heel and stormed out of the hall, his footsteps echoing like gunshots. The crowd slowly began to disperse, conversations resuming in hushed tones. Clara stood frozen, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Adrian glanced down at her, his expression softening slightly. You all right? Clara nodded, though she didn't trust herself to speak. Good. He paused, then added quietly, Meet me tonight. Same place. 9 o'clock. We need to talk. Before Clara could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone at table 1 with her hands still shaking. That evening, Clara almost didn't go. She sat in her room staring at the wall, replaying Caro's accusations over and over. The man was dangerous. If he decided to dig deeper into her background, if he pushed the officials hard enough, if he found even the smallest inconsistency in her story. She couldn't think about that now. At 8:30, she put on her coat and hat and walked through the darkening streets to the Ivy Club. Adrian was waiting at the same corner table, but this time there was no wine, just 2 cups of coffee and a grim expression on his face. Clara sat down without a word. Caro's not going to let this go, Adrian said immediately. I know. He's already started asking questions, talking to people, spreading rumors. What kind of rumors? Adrian hesitated. That you're a con artist, that you bribed officials, that you're being backed by some shadowy benefactor who's rigging the tournament. Clara's stomach turned. That's absurd. Doesn't matter, people will believe what they want to believe, and right now Caro's planting seeds. He leaned forward, his voice low. Clara, you need to be careful. These men don't play fair. If they can't beat you on the board, they'll find another way to destroy you. So what do you suggest? Keep your head down, win your matches, and for the love of... He stopped himself. Don't give them any reason to look closer. Clara laughed bitterly. A bit late for that, don't you think? Adrian's jaw tightened. I'm serious. Caro's connected. If he decides to make this personal... It's already personal, Clara interrupted. It's been personal since the moment I walked through those doors. Then you need to be smarter than him. I beat him. On the board, yes, but this isn't about chess anymore. Adrian's eyes locked onto hers, intense and unwavering. This is about power, and in that game, talent doesn't mean a damn thing. Clara wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that skill and merit would prevail, that the truth would protect her, but she knew better. The world didn't work that way, not for people like her. What do you want me to do? She asked finally. Adrian leaned back, his expression thoughtful. I'll handle Caro, quietly. Keep him distracted, spread some counter rumors. But you need to focus on the semifinals. One more win, and you're in the championship match. Against you. He smiled faintly. Most likely. And then what? Then we see what happens. Clara shook her head. That's not a plan. No, Adrian admitted. But it's all we've got. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling between them like a heavy fog. Finally, Clara spoke. Why are you doing this? Adrian blinked. What? Helping me. Defending me. You don't owe me anything. He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. Maybe I'm tired of watching people get crushed for being different, he said. Maybe I'm tired of playing by rules designed to keep everyone in their place. He looked at her, and for a brief moment, she saw something raw and unguarded in his eyes. Or maybe I just think you deserve a fair fight. Clara didn't know what to say to that, so she simply nodded. And somewhere beneath the fear and exhaustion, she felt something shift, something fragile and uncertain, but real. The next 2 days passed in a haze of tension. Caro didn't return to the tournament hall, but his absence felt more ominous than his presence. Clara heard whispers, saw the way certain men glanced at her when they thought she wasn't looking. The officials began asking more questions. Her registration was reviewed. Twice. But nothing stuck. Adrian, true to his word, seemed to be working behind the scenes. Clara didn't know what he was doing, but the scrutiny gradually lessened. The whispers quieted, and then came the semifinals. Clara's opponent was an Irish grandmaster named Doyle, a wiry, sharp-eyed man in his 50s with a reputation for tactical brilliance. He played fast and aggressive, sacrificing pieces with reckless abandon, turning every game into a knife fight. The match lasted 5 brutal hours. Clara defended, countered, sacrificed, and clawed her way through a maze of complications. Her head pounded, Her hands ached, but she didn't stop. In the end, she won by the thinnest of margins, a passed pawn in a rook endgame that Doyle couldn't stop. When she stood from the table, her legs almost buckled. Doyle shook her hand with grudging respect. "You've got steel in you, Locke. I'll give you that." Clara managed a tired smile. "Thank you, sir." As she left the hall, exhausted and drained, she saw Adrian across the room. He'd won his own semifinal, easily, from the look of it. Their eyes met, and he gave her a small, approving nod. The finals would be tomorrow. Clara versus Adrian. The entire country would be watching. That night, Clara couldn't sleep again. But this time, it wasn't fear keeping her awake. It was the letter. She'd found it slipped under her door when she returned to the boarding house. A single, folded piece of paper with no signature, written in an elegant, unfamiliar hand. "You've made powerful enemies. Be careful what you eat, what you drink, who you trust. This is not a game anymore. A friend." Clara's hand shook as she read it a second time. A third. A threat? A warning? She didn't know, but one thing was clear. Someone knew who she was, and they were watching. She burned the letter in the fireplace, watching the paper curl and blacken, the words disappearing into ash. Then she locked her door, wedged a chair beneath the handle, and sat by the window until dawn, her heart pounding and her mind racing. When the sun finally rose, she made a decision. She would play the final match. She would win. And then she would disappear before anyone could stop her. But first, she had to survive one more day. The morning of the final dawned cold and gray. Clara dressed carefully, checking every button, every stitch. She ate nothing, her stomach too twisted to hold food. She drank only water from a sealed bottle she'd bought herself. When she arrived at the hall, the crowd was already enormous. Hundreds of people packed the space. Lords, ladies, journalists, even a few members of parliament. Table 1 had been moved to the very center of the room, surrounded by ropes to keep the spectators back. This wasn't just a chess match. It was a spectacle. Adrian was already seated when she arrived, impeccably dressed, his expression calm and unreadable. He stood when she approached, a small gesture of respect that didn't go unnoticed by the crowd. Mr. Locke?" he said smoothly, catching himself. Clara nodded. "Your Grace." They sat. The arbiter, a grave-looking man in formal robes, stepped forward to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the final match of the Grand Westminster Chess Tournament. The winner will be crowned national champion and awarded £300 sterling." He paused. "The match will be played to completion, with no time limit. Standard rules apply. May the best player win." The crowd applauded. Clara and Adrian shook hands across the board. His grip was firm, warm. He leaned in slightly, his voice barely a whisper. "Whatever happens," he said, "don't hold back." Clara met his eyes. "I won't." The game began. Adrian opened with pawn to e4, the king's pawn. Clara responded with the Sicilian defense, the same opening she'd used against him in their first match. But this time, everything was different. The stakes were higher, the pressure unbearable. Every move felt like stepping onto a tightrope. The game unfolded slowly, carefully. Both players knew each other's style now, knew the traps and feints. It became a battle of wills as much as skill, a test of who could endure longer, who could outlast the other. An hour passed, then 2. The position grew complex, tangled. Pieces were exchanged, pawns advanced, the endgame loomed, and then, on move 43, Clara saw it. A winning combination. A forced sequence that would give her a decisive advantage. Her hand hovered over her knight. But before she could move, she felt it. A sudden wave of dizziness, sharp and disorienting. Her vision blurred. The board swam in front of her. She gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady herself. Across from her, Adrian frowned. "Locke? Are you all right?" Clara opened her mouth to respond, but her tongue felt thick, heavy. The room tilted. Poison. The word cut through her mind like a blade. She'd been poisoned. Her heart raced. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. She collapsed back into the chair, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The crowd murmured. Someone shouted for a doctor. Adrian was on his feet instantly, moving around the table toward her. "Clara!" He caught her before she fell, his arms strong and steady. "Get a doctor," he barked at the arbiter. "Now!" Clara's vision tunneled. She could hear voices, feel hands on her, but everything seemed distant, muffled. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Adrian's face, pale and furious, his eyes locked on hers. And the last thing she heard was his voice, low and deadly. Someone is going to pay for this. Clara woke to the smell of tobacco and old wood. Her head felt like it had been split open with an axe. Every breath burned. Her mouth tasted like copper and ash. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was, couldn't remember anything beyond the blinding panic of the board tilting beneath her hands and Adrian's voice cutting through the chaos. She forced her eyes open. She was lying on a leather sofa in a room she didn't recognize. Dark paneling, heavy curtains, a fire crackling into the hearth, the kind of room that belonged to old money and older secrets. Easy. Adrian appeared beside her, pressing a cool cloth to her forehead. His sleeves were rolled up, his cravat gone, his dark hair disheveled. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Don't try to sit up yet," he said quietly. "The doctor said you need rest." Clara's throat felt raw. "What happened?" "You were poisoned." His voice was flat, controlled, but his eyes burned with barely contained rage. "Arsenic, most likely. Small dose. Enough to make you sick, not enough to kill. Though it came damn close." The memory slammed back into her, dizzy, falling, the crowd's gasps, the board abandoned mid-game. She tried to sit up anyway and immediately regretted it. The room spun violently. Adrian's hand steadied her shoulder. "I said easy." "Where am I?" "My townhouse. I had you brought here after you collapsed. The tournament physician wanted to send you to a hospital, but I didn't trust him." He pulled a chair closer and sat, his elbows on his knees, his gaze never leaving her face. "I had my own doctor examine you. He says you'll recover, but it'll take a few days." Clara's mind raced despite the throbbing in her skull. "The match? Suspended indefinitely." They can, and they did. Adrian's jaw tightened. "The officials are calling it a medical emergency. They're saying you ate something bad. Food poisoning, an unfortunate accident. But you know it wasn't." "Of course I know." He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "Someone tried to kill you, Clara, or at the very least incapacitate you long enough to force a forfeit." Clara closed her eyes, the pieces falling into place. The letter, the warning. She'd been so focused on the match that she hadn't taken it seriously enough. "Who?" she asked, though she already suspected. "Caro's the obvious choice. He's been circling like a vulture since you beat him." Adrian turned back to her, his expression grim. "But I can't prove it. Not yet. And without proof, accusing a lord of attempted murder is a very quick way to end up in a duel, or worse." "So what do we do?" "We?" Adrian raised an eyebrow. "You're going to stay here, recover, and let me handle this." Clara forced herself to sit up, ignoring the way her vision swam. "Like hell I am." "You nearly died. I nearly died because someone doesn't want me to finish this tournament. And if I hide now, if I let them scare me off, then they win." She met his eyes, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm not giving them that satisfaction." Adrian stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. A sharp, dangerous smile that made him look less like a duke and more like a predator. "You're insane," he said. "Probably. And stubborn. Definitely." He shook his head, but there was something almost like admiration in his expression. "All right, then we do this together. But we do it smart. No more eating or drinking anything you haven't prepared yourself. No more walking alone. And no more trusting anyone outside this room." "Not even you?" The question hung between them, sharp and testing. Adrian's smile faded. He crossed the room and crouched beside the sofa, bringing himself to eye level with her. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, almost gentle. "I've had a dozen opportunities to expose you, Clara, to ruin you. I haven't taken any of them." He paused. "I'm not asking you to trust me blindly, but I am asking you to believe that I have no interest in seeing you destroyed." Clara searched his face, looking for deception, for hidden motives. All she found was exhaustion and something that looked unsettlingly like sincerity. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care so much?" Adrian hesitated. For a moment, she thought he might deflect, make a joke, retreat behind that impenetrable aristocratic mask he wore so well. Instead, he said, "Because I know what it's like to be trapped in a role you didn't choose, to have everyone around you assume they know who you are, what you want, what you're capable of." His voice dropped. "And I know what it's like to want something so badly that you're willing to risk everything for it." The rawness in his words caught Clara off guard. She'd seen Adrian as arrogant, brilliant, dangerous, but not vulnerable. Not human in the way he was now, kneeling beside her with his defenses down, and something close to pain flickering in his eyes. Before she could respond, a sharp knock echoed through the room. Adrian was on his feet instantly, his entire demeanor shifting back to controlled alertness. "Stay here." He crossed to the door and opened it just wide enough to speak to whoever stood on the other side. Clara couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw Adrian's shoulders tense, saw his hand tighten on the doorframe. When he closed the door and turned back, his expression was cold. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Your brother is downstairs." Clara's blood turned to ice. "Thomas?" "He's demanding to see you, says he received word that you'd been taken ill and brought to my residence." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "How much does he know?" Everything. Thomas knew everything. Her brother was the one who'd taught her chess, who'd encouraged her talent, even when their parents dismissed it as unladylike. But he was also a politician now, ambitious and pragmatic, with a career built on respectability and careful alliances. If he found out she'd been masquerading as a man in a public tournament, "He can't see me like this," Clara said quickly. "Not here. Not in your house." "Agreed. But if I send him away without letting him see you, he'll only become more suspicious." Clara's mind raced. "Tell him I'm resting, that I had a fainting spell at the tournament and you offered me a place to recover out of courtesy. He'll want to take you home." "Then I'll refuse." Adrian's eyebrow arched. "And explain why you'd rather stay in the home of a bachelor duke than return to your family?" Clara didn't have an answer for that. The knock came again, louder this time, followed by Thomas's voice. Sharp, authoritative, unmistakably her brother's. "Ashford, open this door immediately." Adrian muttered something under his breath that sounded like a curse. Then he looked at Clara, his expression resolute. "Can you stand?" "I think so." "Good, because we're about to improvise." He helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. Then he grabbed a thick blanket from the sofa and wrapped it around her shoulders, obscuring her borrowed men's clothing. "If he asks questions," Adrian said quietly, "follow my lead." Before Clara could ask what he meant, he opened the door. Thomas Whitlock strode in like a man preparing for battle. He was tall, fair-haired, and shared Clara's sharp cheekbones and intelligent eyes. He wore a perfectly tailored coat and an expression of barely controlled fury. "Ashford, what in blazes—" He stopped dead when he saw Clara. "Clara?" "Hello, Thomas." For a moment, her brother simply stared. Then his gaze snapped to Adrian, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "What is my sister doing in your home?" "Recovering," Adrian said calmly. "She took ill during the tournament. I offered her a safe place to rest." "The tournament?" Thomas's eyes narrowed. "The chess tournament." "Oh no." Clara's stomach dropped. He knew. Somehow he'd figured it out. Thomas turned to her, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Tell me you didn't." Clara lifted her chin. "Didn't what?" "Don't play coy with me. I taught you better than that." He took a step closer, his voice rising. "The mysterious player from the countryside. C.W. Locke. That was you, wasn't it?" The silence that followed was deafening. Clara met her brother's eyes and made a choice. "Yes." Thomas closed his eyes, his jaw working. When he opened them again, he looked less angry than exhausted. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I played chess." "You lied. You deceived tournament officials, impersonated a man, and made a spectacle of yourself in front of half of London's elite." He rounded on Adrian. "And you knew about this?" "I suspected," Adrian said evenly. "And you said nothing?" "It wasn't my secret to tell." Thomas laughed, but there was no humor in it. How noble. The great Duke of Ashford, defender of frauds, and careful. Adrian's voice went cold. "Insult me all you like, but choose your words about your sister very carefully." The two men stared at each other, the tension crackling like lightning. Clara stepped between them, her voice cutting through the standoff. "Thomas!" I knew what I was doing. I knew the risks. Clearly you didn't, or you wouldn't be lying half dead in a stranger's home. He's not a stranger. He's a duke you barely know who has every reason to use this scandal to his advantage. Thomas turned back to Adrian. What do you want? Money? Political favors? Or are you planning to blackmail our family into some advantageous marriage arrangement? Adrian's expression didn't change. I want nothing from you. Everyone wants something. Not from you. Adrian's gaze shifted to Clara and something in his eyes softened, just for a moment. Your sister earned her place in that tournament. She beat some of the best players in England through skill, intelligence, and sheer determination. The only crime here is that she had to lie about who she was to be allowed to play at all. Thomas shook his head. You think this is about fairness? About merit? This is about reputation, Ashford, about family. If this gets out, if anyone discovers what she's done, we'll be ruined. All of us. Then we make sure no one finds out, Clara said quietly. Both men turned to look at her. How? Thomas demanded. You've already been seen by hundreds of people. You've played matches, you've drawn attention, and now you've collapsed in the middle of the final, and half of London is talking about it. Let them talk, Clara said. C.W. Locke had a medical emergency. He'll withdraw from the tournament, disappear back to the countryside, and never be heard from again. And you? I'll go home, resume my normal life, and no one will ever connect the two. Thomas didn't look convinced. And what about him? He gestured toward Adrian. What's to stop him from revealing the truth the moment it becomes convenient? Nothing, Adrian said flatly. Except my word, which, despite what you may think, actually means something. Your word is all you're going to get. Adrian's voice hardened. I've kept your sister's secret this long. I'll continue to keep it. But I'm not going to stand here and defend myself to a man who's more concerned with his political career than his sister's well-being. The barb hit its mark. Thomas's face flushed. How dare you? Thomas, stop. Clara's voice cracked like a whip. He's right. You're not angry because I'm hurt. You're angry because I embarrassed you. That's not true. Isn't it? She took a step toward him, the blanket slipping from her shoulders. I'm standing here, having been poisoned by someone who wanted me dead or disgraced, and all you can think about is how this affects your reputation. Thomas's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since he'd entered the room, he looked uncertain. Clara, he said finally, his voice softer, I'm trying to protect you. No, you're trying to control me. There's a difference. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and final. Thomas looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to Adrian. If word of this gets out, if my sister's name is so much as whispered in connection with this tournament, I will hold you personally responsible. Understood, Adrian said coolly. Thomas gave Clara one last unreadable look, then turned and walked out of the room without another word. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Clara stood frozen, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. She'd just severed something with her brother, something fragile and important. She didn't know if it could be repaired. Adrian moved to her side, his voice quiet. Are you all right? I don't know, Clara admitted. I don't know. He didn't try to comfort her with empty words. He simply stood there, solid and present, until her breathing steadied and the shaking stopped. Finally, Clara spoke. I meant what I said. C.W. Locke needs to disappear. And the tournament? You'll win by default? Congratulations. Adrian's jaw tightened. That's not a victory. No, Clara agreed, but it's the smart choice, the safe one. She hated how those words tasted. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, What if there was another option? Clara looked at him sharply. What kind of option? A dangerous one. He met her eyes, and she saw something reckless and determined burning there. We finished the match. That's insane. I can barely stand. You'll recover. The doctor said a few days rest. And then what? I walk back into that hall, sit down at the board, and pretend nothing happened? They'll be watching me even more closely now. One mistake, one slip, and then we don't make mistakes. Adrian's voice was steady, absolute. We finish what you started, not as Locke, as you. Clara stared at him. You want me to reveal myself? I want you to win, properly, without hiding. They'll never allow it. The officials, the sponsors, they'll disqualify me the moment they find out. Not if we do it right. Adrian began to pace, his mind clearly working through the logistics. The tournament rules don't explicitly forbid women from competing. They just assume no woman would try. If we challenge them on those grounds, force them to acknowledge that you earned your place, they'll laugh us out of the room. Maybe. Or maybe they'll be too embarrassed to admit they've been beaten by a woman the entire time. He stopped pacing and looked at her. Either way, you'll have played the match you deserve to play, under your own name, without apology. Clara wanted to say no, wanted to tell him it was too risky, too reckless, too likely to end in disaster. But part of her, the part that had walked into that hall a week ago knowing exactly how dangerous it was, the part that had beaten Caro and Doyle and Adrian himself, that part was already calculating the odds. If I do this, she said slowly, if I walk back in there and announce who I am, I won't just be risking myself. I'll be risking you too. Your reputation, your standing. I don't care. You should. I don't. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, his eyes locked on hers. Clara, I've spent my entire life playing by their rules. Being the perfect duke, the acceptable rebel, the brilliant eccentric they can tolerate because I was born with the right name and the right title. His voice dropped. I'm tired of it. And if helping you means burning a few bridges, then so be it. Clara's breath caught. She'd never heard him speak like this, without armor, without pretense. Why? She whispered. Why does this matter so much to you? Adrian hesitated, then quietly he said, because watching you play is the first time in years I've seen someone refuse to be anything less than what they are. And I'll be damned if I let them take that from you. The honesty in his words hit Clara like a physical blow. She'd spent the last week thinking of Adrian as an ally of convenience, a useful shield against the wolves circling her. But this wasn't convenience. This was something else entirely, something raw and complicated and terrifyingly real. Before she could respond, another knock echoed through the townhouse, this time from somewhere downstairs. Adrian frowned. Stay here. He left the room, and Clara heard muffled voices, footsteps, the front door opening and closing. When Adrian returned, his face was pale. What is it? Clara asked. He held up a letter, the seal already broken. It's from the tournament committee. They've made a decision about the final match. And? They're declaring me the winner, effective immediately. They're citing your medical condition and inability to continue. He looked up, his expression grim. It's over, Clara. They're not giving you a choice. Clara took the letter from his hands and read it herself. The language was formal, impersonal, final. Mr. C.W. Locke, having been unable to complete the championship match due to medical incapacity, hereby forfeits said match to His Grace, the Duke of Ashford. The committee extends its sympathies and hopes for a swift recovery. She crumpled the letter in her fist. No. Clara, no. She looked at Adrian, her voice hard as iron. I didn't survive poison and my brother's fury and a week of pretending to be someone I'm not, just to let them hand you a trophy by default. What are you suggesting? Clara's mind raced. She thought of Caro's sneer of the officials who'd never once questioned her credentials because they couldn't imagine a woman capable of what she'd done, of Thomas's desperate need to protect a reputation built on lies. And she made a decision. We go back, she said, tomorrow, and I tell them exactly who I am. Adrian's eyes widened. You're serious. Completely. They'll throw you out, ban you, possibly charge you with fraud. Maybe. Or maybe they'll be so shocked that they won't know what to do. Clara's voice steadied, conviction replacing fear. Either way, I'm not hiding anymore. I'm walking into that hall, sitting down at that board, and playing the match I earned, under my name, in front of everyone. And if they refuse, then at least I'll have tried. Adrian stared at her, something like awe dawning in his expression. Then slowly he began to smile. That dangerous, reckless smile that made him look like a man who just found something worth fighting for. All right, he said. Then we do it your way. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He extended his hand. Partners? Clara took it. Partners. They shook, and in that moment Clara felt something shift between them. A line crossed, a compact sealed. Tomorrow she would walk into the Grand Hall of Westminster and reveal herself. Tomorrow she would either change everything or lose it all. But tonight, for the first time since this entire mad gamble began, she didn't feel alone. The next morning dawned cold and merciless. Clara dressed carefully, not in men's clothing this time, but in a simple, elegant dress the color of midnight. She pinned her hair up, leaving her face bare and unmistakable. No disguise, no pretense. Adrian waited for her downstairs, already dressed in formal attire. When he saw her, something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "Ready?" he asked. "No," Clara admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." They took Adrian's carriage to Westminster, arriving just before noon. The hall was already packed. Word had spread that the committee would be making a formal announcement about the championship. No one expected what was about to happen. Clara and Adrian walked through the doors together, and immediately the room went silent. Heads turned, conversations died. Men stared, their expressions ranging from confusion to shock to dawning recognition. Clara kept walking, her head high, her steps steady. She walked straight to the center of the hall, where the committee sat at a raised table, and stopped. Lord Pemberton, the chief sponsor, rose slowly from his seat. Miss Whitlock? What is the meaning of this?" Clara's voice rang out clear and strong, carrying to every corner of the hall. "My name is Clara Whitlock. For the past week I have been competing in this tournament under the name C.W. Locke." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I am also the player who was scheduled to face the Duke of Ashford in yesterday's championship match." The hall erupted. Men shouted. Women gasped. The committee members looked at each other in helpless confusion. Pemberton's face turned purple. This is an outrage, a fraud. You have no right." "I have every right," Clara interrupted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "I registered. I played. I won my matches fairly, and I earned my place in the final." "You lied." "I gave a false name, yes, but I broke no rule that explicitly forbids my participation." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the men who'd watched her play, who'd applauded her victories, who'd never once suspected. "I am a woman. I am also a chess player, and I am demanding, to finish the match I started." "Impossible!" Caro's voice boomed from the back of the hall. He pushed through the crowd, his face twisted with fury. "This woman is a liar and a charlatan. She has dishonored this entire tournament." "I dishonored nothing," Clara shot back. "I played chess, that's all. And if my being a woman makes that dishonorable, then the dishonor lies with you, not me." Caro's hand went to his side as if reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. "You little... Enough!" Adrian stepped forward, placing himself between Clara and Caro. His voice was quiet, but it carried an authority that made even Caro hesitate. "The lady has made a valid point," Adrian said. "The tournament rules make no mention of gender. They require only that participants register, pay the entry fee, and compete fairly. Miss Whitlock has done all three." "She entered under a false identity," Pemberton sputtered. "A male name, yes, but is that illegal? Is there a law against a woman adopting a masculine pseudonym?" Adrian's gaze swept the committee. "I suggest you check your rulebook, gentlemen, because unless I'm mistaken, you have no grounds to disqualify her." The committee members exchanged panicked looks. One of them, a thin, nervous man, flipped frantically through a leather-bound book, scanning page after page. The silence stretched. Finally, the man looked up, his face pale. "There is no explicit prohibition." The hall exploded again, this time with arguments, accusations, demands. Clara stood in the center of it all, her heart pounding, her hands clenched into fists. This was the moment, the point of no return. Pemberton slammed his hand on the table, demanding silence. When the room finally quieted, he looked at Clara with barely disguised contempt. "Very well, Miss Whitlock. You wish to play? Then play. But understand this. The moment you lose, you will be held accountable for every lie, every deception. This tournament will not be mocked." "I understand," Clara said. "And you, Ashford?" Pemberton turned to Adrian. You're willing to continue this farce? Adrian's smile was cold. I'm willing to finish a chess match. If that's a farce to you, perhaps you're in the wrong business. Pemberton's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Fine. He gestured to table 1, still set up from yesterday's abandoned match. Resume your positions. The match will continue from where it was interrupted. Clara walked to the table, her legs steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Adrian followed. They sat. The crowd pressed closer, silent now, watching. Clara looked at the board. The pieces exactly as they'd been when she collapsed. She'd been about to play her knight, the move that would give her a winning advantage. But now, looking at the position again, something felt different. The combination was still there, the path to victory clear. But winning now, like this, after everything, would prove nothing. It would confirm their worst assumptions, that she'd cheated, manipulated, deceived her way to the top. She needed more than victory. She needed to show them she belonged. So instead of playing the winning move, Clara played something else. She sacrificed her queen. The crowd gasped. Adrian's eyes snapped to hers, sharp and questioning. Clara met his gaze steadily. Trust me, her eyes said. The game continued. Adrian took the queen, as he had to, but in doing so, he opened his own position, creating weaknesses Clara could exploit. The match became a dance. Give and take, thrust and parry, each player testing the other, pushing the limits of skill and strategy. Hours passed. The crowd never moved, and slowly, Clara began to see it. The path not to victory, but to something else. Something better. A draw. A perfect, honorable, undeniable draw. She played for it with everything she had, steering the game toward an endgame neither could win. And Adrian, brilliant as he was, saw it too. On move 78, with only kings and pawns left on the board, Adrian extended his hand. Draw? He asked quietly. Clara shook it. Draw. The hall erupted, some in anger, some in disbelief, a few in genuine applause. But Clara didn't care. She'd done it. She'd played under her own name in front of everyone and held her own against the best player in England. She hadn't won, but she hadn't lost either. And in that moment, it was enough. Pemberton stood, his face twisted with frustration. This is unprecedented. The committee will need to deliberate. Deliberate all you want, Adrian said, rising from his seat. But the match is concluded, honorably. And I, for one, am satisfied. He offered Clara his arm. She took it. Together they walked out of the Grand Hall of Westminster, leaving chaos and shocked silence in their wake. Outside, the November air was crisp and biting. Clara breathed it in, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen, Adrian said. Probably both. He laughed, and the sound was genuine, unguarded. They stood there for a moment, on the steps of Westminster, the world shifting around them. Then Adrian said quietly, You sacrificed the win. I did. Why? Clara looked up at him, at this complicated, brilliant, infuriating man who'd somehow become her ally, her partner, something more than she had words for. Because winning wasn't the point, she said. Proving I deserved to be there was. Adrian studied her face, something soft and wondering in his expression. You're extraordinary, he said. Before Clara could respond, a commotion erupted behind them. They turned to see Caro storming out of the hall, his face purple with rage, a group of men trailing behind him. This isn't over, Ashford, he shouted. You think you can humiliate me and walk away? Adrian's expression hardened. I think you've humiliated yourself quite enough without my help. Caro's hand went to his coat, and this time, when he pulled it back, there was a pistol in his grip. The world seemed to slow. Clara heard Adrian's sharp intake of breath, felt him push her behind him. Don't be a fool, Caro, Adrian said, his voice deadly calm. A fool? Caro laughed, wild and unhinged. You've ruined me, both of you, and I'll see you pay for it. He raised the pistol. And Clara, without thinking, without hesitating, stepped out from behind Adrian and directly into the line of fire. No, she said, her voice ringing clear. You want someone to blame? Blame me. I'm the one who beat you. I'm the one who exposed you for what you are. If you're going to shoot someone, shoot me. The square went silent. Caro's hand shook, the pistol wavering. Adrian's voice was low, furious. Clara, What the hell are you doing? I'm calling his bluff. She kept her eyes locked on Caro. Because he's not a murderer. He's just a coward who can't accept that he lost to a woman. For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. Then Caro's hand dropped. The pistol clattered to the cobblestones. And the man who'd terrorized her, who'd poisoned her, who'd tried to destroy her, broke. He sank to his knees, his face in his hands, shaking. The crowd surged forward, men pulling Caro away, voices shouting for constables, for witnesses. Clara stood frozen, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Adrian's hand closed around her arm, steady and grounding. "You're insane," he said, his voice rough. "So you keep saying." He pulled her close, not quite an embrace, but something near it, his forehead resting briefly against hers. "Don't ever do that again," he whispered. "No promises." And despite everything, the chaos, the danger, the complete upheaval of everything she'd known, Clara found herself smiling. Because she'd done it. She'd walked into the fire and come out the other side. And she wasn't alone. The constables took Caro away in chains. Clara watched from the steps of Westminster as they loaded him into a black carriage, his head bowed, his expensive coat stained with mud and shame. A crowd had gathered, curious onlookers, journalists scribbling frantically in notebooks, members of the tournament committee huddled in anxious conversation. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt hollow. Adrian's hand was still on her arm, anchoring her to the present moment. His grip was firm but gentle, and when she finally looked at him, she saw her own exhaustion reflected in his eyes. "We should go," he said quietly. "Before they start asking questions neither of us wants to answer." Clara nodded, but before they could move, Lord Pemberton appeared at the top of the steps, flanked by 2 other committee members. His face was gray, his usual bluster replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like fear. "Miss Whitlock." "Your Grace." He cleared his throat. "A word, if you please." Adrian's jaw tightened. "If this is about pressing charges—" "No charges." Pemberton glanced at the dispersing crowd, then lowered his voice. "But we do need to discuss the matter of the tournament results, and your continued participation." Clara straightened her spine. "I played fairly. The match ended in a draw. There's nothing to discuss." "I'm afraid there's quite a bit to discuss." Pemberton gestured toward the hall. "Inside, privately." Adrian moved closer to Clara, a subtle shift that made his position clear. "Anything you need to say to Miss Whitlock can be said to both of us." Pemberton's mouth thinned, but he nodded. "Very well, follow me." They were led to a small antechamber off the main hall, a room Clara had never seen before, lined with dark wood and filled with the smell of old cigars. The other committee members followed, closing the door behind them. Pemberton didn't waste time. "The committee has voted. Given the extraordinary circumstances of your revelation and the subsequent incident with Lord Caro, we've decided to void the tournament entirely." Clara felt the words like a physical blow. "Void it?" "All results nullified. No champion declared. Prize money returned to the sponsors." Pemberton folded his hands. "It's the only way to preserve the tournament's integrity after such a scandal." "Scandal?" Adrian's voice went dangerously soft. "The only scandal here is that you allowed a man to commit attempted murder under your watch and did nothing to stop it. We had no proof. You had plenty of proof. You simply chose to ignore it because addressing it would have been inconvenient." Adrian took a step forward. "And now you want to erase Miss Whitlock's achievements because acknowledging them would force you to admit a woman can play chess as well as any man in this room. Better than most, in fact." One of the other committee members, a portly man with mutton chops, bristled. "See here, Ashford." "No, you see here." Adrian's voice cut like a blade. "You can void the tournament if you want. You can pretend none of this happened. But it won't change the fact that Clara Whitlock played 7 matches against some of the finest players in England and drew with the reigning champion. That's not a scandal. That's history." The room fell silent. Pemberton's face had gone from gray to red. "Your Grace, I understand your affection for the young lady may be clouding your judgment." "My judgment is perfectly clear," Adrian interrupted, "unlike yours." Clara had been silent throughout the exchange, letting Adrian fight this battle because part of her was too angry, too tired to form words. But now, Watching these men scramble to protect their fragile sense of order, something inside her shifted. She stepped forward, her voice calm and steady. "You're right about one thing, Lord Pemberton. This is a scandal, but not for the reasons you think." Pemberton blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "The scandal is that I had to lie to play, that I had to disguise myself, hide my identity, and risk everything just for the chance to sit at a chessboard." She met his eyes without flinching. "The scandal is that you're so terrified of what my participation means that you'd rather destroy the entire tournament than acknowledge it." That's not... We're not terrified. Aren't you?" Claire's voice hardened. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're more afraid of admitting you were wrong than you are of doing the right thing." The committee members exchanged uncomfortable glances. The man with mutton chops cleared his throat. "Miss Whitlock, you must understand our position. If we acknowledge your participation, if we allow the results to stand, we'll be setting a precedent. Other women will want to compete. The entire structure of competitive chess will be called into question." "Good," Clara said simply. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Pemberton shook his head. "You're asking for chaos. I'm asking for fairness." Clara took a breath, steadying herself. "But I'm not asking you to make that decision today. Void the tournament if you must. I don't care about the title or the prize money. I got what I came for." "Which is?" "Proof," Clara said. "Proof that I belong at that board, that I earned my place through skill, not charity or lowered standards." She glanced at Adrian, then back at Pemberton. "You can erase the records, but you can't erase what happened. People saw. They'll remember. And sooner or later, you're going to have to decide whether you want to be remembered as the men who opened the doors or the ones who nailed them shut." She turned and walked toward the door. Adrian followed without a word. Behind them, Pemberton called out, "Miss Whitlock!" Clara paused, her hand on the doorknob. "What you did today," Pemberton said slowly, as if the words were being dragged out of him, "was remarkable. Reckless and improper, but remarkable." He hesitated. "The committee will meet again next week to discuss future tournament policies. I cannot promise anything, but your point has been noted. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an acknowledgement, really, but it was something." Clara nodded once, then left. Outside, the late afternoon sun was breaking through the clouds, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. Clara breathed in the cold air, feeling the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. Adrian stood beside her, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "That was unexpected," he said finally. "Which part?" "All of it." He glanced at her, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Though I'm starting to realize I should stop being surprised by you." Clara smiled faintly. "I'm still surprising myself." They walked in silence for a few moments, moving away from Westminster and toward the quieter streets beyond. The city was alive around them, carriages rattling past, street vendors calling out their wares, the distant sound of church bells marking the hour. It felt surreal. 24 hours ago, Clara had been lying half-conscious in Adrian's townhouse, poisoned and terrified. Now she was walking through London as herself, her secret exposed, her life irrevocably changed, and she had no idea what came next. "Where will you go?" Adrian asked, as if reading her thoughts. "Home, I suppose. Back to my family." The words tasted bitter, "though I'm not sure what kind of welcome I'll receive." "Your brother seemed concerned." "My brother is always concerned, usually about the wrong things." Clara shook her head. "He'll want me to disappear, to pretend this never happened, resume my proper life, marry some appropriate man, and never touch a chess piece again." "And will you?" Clara stopped walking. She looked at Adrian, really looked at him. This complicated, brilliant man who'd risked his own reputation to stand beside her, who'd defended her to a room full of powerful men, who'd somehow become the one person she trusted in a world full of liars and cowards. "No," she said. "I won't." Something shifted in Adrian's expression, relief, perhaps, or admiration, or something else she couldn't quite name. "Good," he said softly. They resumed walking, and this time the silence felt different, comfortable, almost companionable. But it didn't last. As they rounded the corner onto a broader avenue, a familiar figure stepped out from a doorway blocking their path. Thomas. Claire's brother looked like he hadn't slept. His coat was rumpled, his cravat loose, and there were dark circles under his eyes. But his expression was hard, determined. Clara, a word. Thomas, I'm not in the mood. I don't care. He glanced at Adrian with barely concealed hostility. Alone. Adrian's posture shifted, protective. I don't think... It's all right, Clara said quietly. She touched Adrian's arm briefly. Give us a moment? Adrian looked like he wanted to argue, but after a long pause, he nodded. I'll be right there. He gestured to a cafe across the street. You need me? You call. I will. He walked away, but Clara could feel his gaze on her back, watchful and ready. Thomas waited until Adrian was out of earshot before speaking. What the hell were you thinking? Clara crossed her arms. Hello to you too, brother. Don't. Thomas's voice was sharp. Don't pretend this is a normal conversation. You just exposed yourself in front of half of London's elite, accused a lord of attempted murder, and forced the most prestigious chess tournament in the country to void its results. So I'll ask again, what were you thinking? I was thinking, Clara said evenly, that I was tired of hiding. Hiding kept you safe. Hiding kept me invisible. There's a difference. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, frustration radiating off him. You don't understand what you've done. The scandal, the gossip, it's already spreading. By tomorrow, every newspaper in London will be printing your name, our family's name. And? Thomas stared at her. Clara, this will ruin us. Father's business connections, my political career. Everything we've built. Everything you've built, Clara corrected. I never asked to be part of your grand plans, Thomas. I never wanted the life you and Father designed for me. So you decided to destroy it instead? I decided to live my own life, on my own terms. Clara's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. And if that's inconvenient for you, then I'm sorry, but I'm not apologizing for existing. Thomas looked at her like she was a stranger. You're being selfish. Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally being honest. Honesty? Thomas laughed bitterly. You lied your way into that tournament. You deceived everyone around you. Where's the honesty in that? I lied because I had to. Clara's composure cracked. Because the simple truth that I wanted to play chess, wasn't enough. Because no one would have let me through the door if I'd told them who I really was. She took a step closer to her brother. So don't you dare lecture me about honesty when you live in a world built on lies and pretense and people pretending to be less than they are, just to make men like you comfortable. The words hung between them, raw and cutting. Thomas's jaw worked. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter but no less intense. I can't protect you from this, Clara. Not anymore. If you walk away now, if you come home, apologize. Let this fade. Maybe we can salvage something. But if you keep pushing, if you keep making enemies of powerful men, then what? Clara challenged. They'll hurt me? They already tried to kill me, Thomas. What more can they do? They can make sure you never have a moment's peace for the rest of your life, Thomas said flatly. They can turn you into a cautionary tale, a laughingstock. They can make it so no one ever takes you seriously again. Or, a new voice interjected, they could fail. Both Clara and Thomas turned. Adrian had returned, his approach silent but his presence unmistakable. He stopped beside Clara, his gaze fixed on Thomas. You're making the same mistake Caro made, Adrian continued. Assuming that public opinion is fixed, that power is permanent. But it's not. It shifts. It changes. And sometimes, all it takes is one person refusing to back down to change everything. Thomas's eyes narrowed. This isn't your fight, Ashford. It is now. Why? What do you get out of this? What's your angle? Not everything is a transaction, Whitlock. Adrian's voice was cold. Some of us are capable of doing the right thing without calculating the cost. Thomas's face flushed. Don't presume to lecture me on right and wrong. Then don't presume to control your sister's life. Adrian's tone softened slightly, but his words remained sharp. She's not property. She's not a pawn in your political games. She's a person who made a choice, a brave one, and she deserves support, not condemnation. For a long moment, Thomas said nothing. He looked between Clara and Adrian, something complicated working across his features. Anger, frustration, maybe even grudging respect. Finally, he sighed. You really won't come home? Clara shook her head. Not if coming home means pretending this never happened. Then where will you go? I don't know yet, Clara admitted, but I'll figure it out. Thomas's expression tightened, but he nodded. Fine, but don't expect Father to be as understanding as I am. I never did. Her brother studied her face for a long moment, as if trying to memorize it. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Clara watched him go, feeling something twist in her chest. She'd known this moment would come, had known from the instant she decided to reveal herself that there would be a price to pay. But knowing didn't make it hurt less. Adrian's hand found hers, his fingers threading through hers with surprising gentleness. You all right? He asked quietly. I will be, Clara said, and she meant it. They stood there for a moment, hand in hand, as the city moved around them. Then Adrian said, You meant it, didn't you? That you don't know where you'll go? Yes. Then come with me. Clara looked at him sharply. What? Not... He stopped, reconsidered. I'm not proposing anything improper. I have a property in the countryside. A manor house. It's been empty for months. I barely use it, but it's private, comfortable. You could stay there. Take some time to figure out what you want to do next without the entire city watching your every move. Clara's first instinct was to refuse. The idea of accepting charity, of being dependent on anyone, especially a man she barely knew despite everything they'd been through, made her skin crawl. But the alternative was going home. Facing her father's wrath, her mother's disappointment, the suffocating weight of expectations she'd just publicly shattered. I can't accept. It's not charity, Adrian interrupted. It's strategy. You need time and space. I have both to offer. Use them. And what do you get out of this? He smiled slightly. Peace of mind. Knowing you're safe and not sleeping in some disreputable boarding house where anyone could find you. I can take care of myself. I know. You've proven that quite thoroughly. His expression grew serious. But you don't have to. Not alone. Not anymore. Clara wanted to argue. Wanted to insist she didn't need help, didn't need protection, didn't need anything from anyone. But the truth was, she was exhausted. Physically, emotionally, completely drained. And the thought of a safe place, a quiet place where she could breathe without worrying about who was watching, was almost unbearably tempting. One condition, she said finally. Name it. This doesn't make me beholden to you. I'm not your responsibility or your project or your anything. Adrian's smile widened. Noted. I mean it. I know. That's what I like about you. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks and looked away before he could see it. When would we leave? Tomorrow, if you're ready. The house is only a few hours outside London. We can have you settled by evening. And then what? Adrian shrugged. Then you rest, recover, and decide what comes next on your own terms. It was such a simple offer, and yet it felt like the first genuine kindness anyone had shown her in longer than she could remember. All right, Clara said. I'll come. The relief in Adrian's expression was immediate and genuine. Good. I'll make the arrangements. They walked together toward the cafe, and for the first time in days, Clara allowed herself to imagine a future beyond the next crisis. A future where she wasn't constantly fighting for the right to exist as herself. It felt dangerous to hope, but she did anyway. That evening, Clara returned to her boarding house to collect her few belongings. The landlady, a sour-faced woman who'd barely tolerated Mr. Locke, refused to look at her directly, as if Clara's revealed gender had somehow contaminated the premises. Clara packed quickly, stuffing her clothes and a few books into a worn leather bag. As she was lacing it shut, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find a young woman standing in the hallway, no more than 20, dressed in a simple but neat day dress, her eyes wide with nervous excitement. Miss Whitlock? The woman said breathlessly. Yes? I'm sorry to intrude. I know you don't know me. My name is Margaret Ellis. She twisted her hands together. I was there, at Westminster. I saw what you did. Clara's stomach tightened. I see. No, I mean, Margaret rushed on. It was extraordinary. The way you stood up to them, the way you played. I've never seen anything like it. Her eyes shone. My father teaches mathematics at a girls' school. He taught me chess when I was young, but I've never been allowed to play seriously. No clubs will accept women. No tournaments will let us compete. She took a breath. But watching you today, seeing that it's possible? She stopped, emotion choking her words. Clara felt something catch in her throat. You want to play? More than anything, Margaret whispered. And now I think maybe I can. Clara didn't know what to say. She'd walked into Westminster thinking only of herself, of her own need to prove she belonged. She hadn't considered that others might be watching, might see her defiance as permission to dream their own impossible dreams. You can, Clara said finally. You absolutely can. Margaret's smile was radiant. Thank you for showing us it's possible. After the young woman left, Clara sat on the edge of her narrow bed, staring at nothing. She'd spent the last week terrified of exposure, convinced that revealing herself would mean the end of everything. But maybe, just maybe, it was a beginning instead. The next morning, Adrian arrived in an elegant carriage, far less ostentatious than Clara had expected. He helped her load her single bag, raising an eyebrow at how little she was bringing but saying nothing. The journey out of London was quiet at first, both of them lost in their own thoughts. But as the city gave way to countryside, rolling green hills, bare trees silhouetted against gray sky, Clara felt something in her chest begin to loosen. Thank you, she said suddenly. Adrian glanced over. For what? For yesterday? For standing with me when you had every reason to walk away? I had no reason to walk away. You had plenty. Your reputation, your standing, are secure enough to weather a little scandal. He smiled slightly. Besides, I told you, I'm tired of playing by their rules. Still, it was a risk. A worthwhile one. He met her eyes. Clara, I meant what I said. Watching you play, watching you refuse to be anything less than what you are, it reminded me why I fell in love with chess in the first place. Not for titles or prestige or proving I'm the smartest person in the room, but for the game itself. The purity of it. Clara felt her breath catch. I never thanked you for the draw. You don't need to. It was the right result. Was it? Adrian was quiet for a moment. I think so. A win would have been tainted. People would always wonder if I'd let you win out of chivalry or if you'd won through deception. But a draw? He shook his head. A draw is honest. It says we're equals, that neither of us had an advantage the other couldn't match. We're not equals, Clara said. You have a title, wealth, freedom I'll never have. On the board, we are. And that's what matters. The carriage hit a bump, jostling them both. When they settled, Adrian was closer than before, his shoulder almost touching hers. What will you do? He asked. After you've had time to rest? Clara considered the question. A week ago, she would have said she didn't know. But now, after everything, after Margaret's shining eyes and the committee's nervous acknowledgement and the knowledge that her defiance had changed something, however small, she found she had an answer. I'm going to play, she said simply. Play? Chess, publicly, under my own name. She looked at Adrian. I'm going to start a women's chess club. Teach anyone who wants to learn. And when the next tournament comes, if they allow it, I'm going to enter again. Not as C.W. Locke, as Clara Whitlock. Adrian's smile was slow and genuine. They'll fight you. I know. It won't be easy. I know that too. But you're going to do it anyway. Yes. Clara felt certainty settle in her bones. I am. They rode in silence for a while longer, and this time, when Adrian's hand found hers, she didn't pull away. The manor house appeared as the sun was beginning to set, a sprawling stone building surrounded by gardens gone wild with autumn. It was beautiful in a melancholy way, like something out of a Gothic novel. Adrian helped her down from the carriage. It's not much, but it's private. The staff comes once a week to clean, but otherwise you'll have the place to yourself. Clara looked up at the ivy-covered walls, the tall windows reflecting the dying light. It's perfect. He showed her inside, through rooms filled with dust-covered furniture and paintings of stern-faced ancestors. He led her to a bedroom on the second floor, spacious, comfortable, with a window overlooking the gardens. There's a library downstairs, he said, stocked with chess books, among other things, and a music room with a piano, if you play. I don't. Then it will make an excellent echo chamber. He smiled. I'll have supplies sent from London, food, firewood, whatever you need, and if you want company, I'm only a few hours away. You're not staying? Not unless you want me to. Adrian's expression was carefully neutral. I thought you might appreciate the solitude. Clara realized he was right, but she also realized, with some surprise, that she would miss him. Perhaps you could visit, she said. Occasionally. Occasionally, Adrian agreed. And when you're ready, when you've decided what comes next, you'll let me know? I will. They stood in the doorway of the bedroom, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Finally, Adrian reached into his coat and pulled out a small wooden box. He handed it to Clara. What is this? She asked. Open it. Inside was a chess set, exquisitely carved, the pieces weighted and balanced perfectly. Clara lifted the white queen, feeling its heft in her palm. It was my mother's, Adrian said quietly. She taught me to play when I was 6. She died when I was 10, and I've kept this set ever since. He paused. I want you to have it. Clara's throat tightened. Adrian, I can't. You can, and you will. His voice was firm but gentle. She would have liked you, would have appreciated what you're trying to do. And I think she'd want this to belong to someone who understands what it means to fight for something you love. Clara looked down at the queen in her hand, this beautiful, fragile thing that represented so much more than a game. Thank you, she whispered. Adrian nodded. Then, before she could say anything else, he turned and left. Clara heard his footsteps on the stairs, heard the front door open and close, heard the carriage pull away. And then she was alone. She set the chess set on the windowsill and opened the box fully, examining each piece. As she touched them, she thought about Margaret, about the other women who might be watching, waiting to see if change was truly possible. She thought about her brother's anger and her father's inevitable disappointment. She thought about Adrian's quiet faith in her, his willingness to risk everything for someone he barely knew. And she thought about herself, about the girl who'd walked into Westminster a week ago wearing a disguise and walked out wearing her own name. For the first time in her life, Clara Whitlock felt free. It terrified her, it exhilarated her, and she knew with absolute certainty that she would never go back. 3 days later, a letter arrived. Clara found it on the doorstep, sealed with the official stamp of the Westminster Tournament Committee. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in formal script. Miss Clara Whitlock, the committee has concluded its deliberations regarding the recent tournament and your participation therein. After much discussion, we have decided to reinstate the results with the following notation. The championship match between Miss Clara Whitlock and His Grace. The Duke of Ashford concluded in an honorable draw, both players demonstrating exceptional skill and sportsmanship. Furthermore, the committee announces that beginning next year, the Westminster Chess Tournament will be open to all qualified players, regardless of gender. We extend our recognition of your remarkable achievement and our hope that you will consider participating in future competitions. Respectfully, Lord Harrison Pemberton, Chairman. Clara read the letter 3 times, hardly daring to believe it. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. The doors were opening. She ran to the library, grabbed paper and pen, and wrote 2 letters. The first was to Margaret Ellis, inviting her to join the women's chess club Clara was founding. The second was to Adrian. It contained only 4 words. Thank you, I'm ready. Adrian's reply arrived the next morning, delivered by a rider who looked like he'd galloped through the night without stopping. Clara opened the letter with trembling fingers, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with chess. Clara, I'm coming. Be ready. She laughed, the sound echoing through the empty manor. Of course he hadn't asked what she was ready for. He simply trusted that whatever she'd decided, it would be worth the journey. She spent the day preparing. Not for his arrival. The house was as ready as it would ever be, and she'd long since stopped worrying about appearances. No, she prepared for what came next, for the fight she was about to pick with the world. She wrote a manifesto of sorts, outlining the principles for her women's chess club. No membership fees that would exclude working women. No requirement for male sponsors or chaperones. No rules about proper conduct beyond respect for the game and each other. It was radical, possibly illegal in some interpretations of public assembly laws, and exactly what needed to exist. By the time Adrian's carriage appeared on the drive that evening, Clara had filled 10 pages with plans, possibilities, and a burning conviction that this was only the beginning. She met him at the door. He looked different somehow, less polished, more alive. His coat was rumpled from travel, his hair windblown, and when he saw her standing in the doorway, his entire face transformed. "You look ready," he said. "I am." Clara held up the pages. "I'm going to change everything." Adrian's smile was fierce and proud. "I know." They spent that evening in the library, Clara pacing and talking while Adrian listened, occasionally interjecting with questions or suggestions. He didn't try to moderate her ambitions or warn her about the obstacles ahead. He simply helped her strategize, using his knowledge of London's social networks and political structures to identify potential allies and inevitable enemies. "The Marchioness of Kellington," he said at one point, tapping a name on Clara's list. "She's been quietly funding education initiatives for girls. Doesn't advertise it because her husband would disapprove, but she has money and influence. If you approach her correctly, she'd support a women's chess club. She'd support anything that makes the old guard uncomfortable." Adrian's eyes gleamed. "And she's friends with Lady Catherine Harding, who runs one of the most influential salons in London. Get those two on your side and you'll have access to half the city's progressive thinkers." Clara scribbled notes frantically. "And the venue? I'll need a space large enough for weekly meetings. There's a building on Clerkenwell Street. Used to be a gentleman's club that went bankrupt last year. It's been sitting empty, and the owner is desperate to rent it." Adrian leaned back in his chair. "I could arrange an introduction." "Could you arrange a reasonable rent?" Clara asked dryly. "I could arrange a very reasonable rent," he paused. "Or I could simply buy the building and let you use it." Clara stopped pacing. "No? No? I appreciate the offer, but this needs to stand on its own. If it's built on your charity, it's not charity, it's an investment." "In what?" Adrian met her eyes steadily. "In the future. In a world where talent matters more than gender. In you." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Clara felt heat rise to her face. "Adrian, I'm not asking for anything in return," he said quietly. "I'm simply offering resources you need. What you do with them is entirely your choice." She wanted to refuse on principle, wanted to insist she could do this alone. But the truth was, she couldn't, not without help. And if she was going to accept help from anyone, it might as well be from someone who understood what she was trying to build. "Alone," she said finally. "Not a gift. I'll pay you back. However you want to structure it. And I make all the decisions about the club. The rules, the membership, everything." "Of course." Clara studied his face, looking for hidden conditions, unstated expectations. All she found was patience and something that looked uncomfortably like admiration. "All right," she said, "but we do this properly. Written agreement, terms, everything documented." Adrian's smile widened. "I wouldn't have it any other way." They shook hands, and Clara felt the ghost of their first handshake across a chessboard, both of them pretending to be something they weren't. Now they were something else entirely. Partners. The Whitlock Women's Chess Society. Clara refused to call it a club. The word felt too frivolous. Opened its doors 3 months later on a cold February morning. The building on Clerkenwell Street had been transformed. The heavy curtains and cigar-stained wallpaper were gone, replaced by bright paint, tall windows, and row after row of chess tables. The main room could hold 50 people comfortably, with smaller rooms for lessons and a library stocked with chess texts in English, French, and German. Clara stood in the doorway that first morning, watching as women began to arrive. Some came alone, clutching letters of invitation. Others came in pairs or groups, nervous but determined. Margaret Ellis was among the first through the door, her eyes wide with wonder. "Miss Whitlock, it's extraordinary." "It's ours," Clara corrected. "All of ours." By noon, 43 women had registered, daughters of merchants and factory workers, teachers and governesses, women from wealthy families and women who'd scraped together the omnibus fare to attend. The youngest was 14. The oldest was 67, a widow who confessed she'd been playing chess in secret for 40 years. Clara welcomed each of them personally, learning their names, their stories, why they'd come. "I saw you at Westminster," one woman said, gripping Clara's hand. "I told my husband I wanted to learn chess, and for the first time he didn't laugh at me." "My daughter loves games," another said, "but everyone tells her girls shouldn't be competitive. I want her to know that's a lie." "I just want to play," a quiet voice said. Clara turned to find a young woman in a maid's uniform, her hands red and chapped from work. "Is that allowed, just wanting to play?" "That's the best reason of all," Clara said. Adrian attended the opening, though he stayed in the background, observing rather than participating. Clara caught his eye once across the crowded room, and the pride in his expression made her throat tight. When the formal introductions were done and the first lessons had begun, Margaret proving to be a natural teacher, patient and encouraging, Clara slipped out to the small office she'd claimed as her own. She was reviewing the membership ledger when someone knocked. "Come in." The door opened and Thomas stepped inside. Clara's hand froze on the page. She hadn't seen her brother since that confrontation on the street months ago, hadn't received any letters, any messages. She'd assumed he'd washed his hands of her entirely. "Thomas." "Clara." He stood awkwardly in the doorway, hat in hand. "May I?" She gestured to the chair across from her desk. He sat, looking around the office with an unreadable expression. "Quite the operation you've built here," he said finally. "We're just getting started. I heard about the committee's decision, opening the tournament to women. You don't approve." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't say that." Clara looked at him properly then, really looked. He seemed older, tired. The sharp edges of his anger had worn away, leaving something more complicated behind. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Because you're my sister, and because—" He stopped, choosing his words carefully. "Because I was wrong." Clara blinked. "I'm sorry?" "I was wrong," Thomas repeated. "About you, about what you were doing. I thought you were being reckless, selfish, throwing away everything our family had built for a game." He met her eyes. "But it wasn't just a game to you, was it?" "No." "And you weren't trying to destroy anything. You were trying to build something new." Clara felt her chest tighten. "Thomas, I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said quickly. "I know I said things, did things. I was more concerned with how your choices affected me than with what they meant to you. That was inexcusable. You were trying to protect the family. I was trying to protect my own comfort," Thomas corrected. "There's a difference. And I'm sorry." The apology settled between them, tentative but genuine. Clara found herself blinking back unexpected tears. "I never wanted to hurt you." "I know, and I never wanted to crush who you are." He glanced toward the door, toward the sounds of women laughing and chess pieces clicking on boards. "What you're doing here, it's important. More important than I realized." "Does Father feel the same way?" Thomas's expression darkened. "Father is Father. He'll come around eventually. Or he won't. But that's his choice to make, not yours." "And Mother?" A small smile crossed Thomas's face. "Mother asked me to give you this." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. Clara unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a wooden chess piece. A queen, exquisitely carved, old enough that the wood had darkened with age. "It was her grandmother's," Thomas explained. "From a set she played with as a girl. She said—" His voice caught slightly. "She said she always regretted not being brave enough to play publicly. She wants you to have it, as a reminder that you're not just fighting for yourself." Clara closed her fingers around the queen, feeling the weight of generations in her palm. "Thank you," she whispered. Thomas stood. "I should go, but Clara, if you need anything. Money, connections, someone to argue with stubborn committee members, I'll let you know." He nodded, then paused at the door. "I'm proud of you. I should have said that months ago." After he left, Clara sat alone in the office, holding the queen her mother had sent. She thought about the women in the other room, learning a game that had once been forbidden to them. She thought about Margaret's shining enthusiasm, and the widow who'd played in secret for 40 years, and the maid who just wanted to play. She thought about her mother as a girl, wanting something she'd been too afraid to reach for, and she made a promise, to all of them, and to herself. This was only the beginning. The Women's Chess Society grew rapidly. Within 6 months, membership had tripled. Women came from all over London and then from beyond. Birmingham, Manchester, even a few from Edinburgh who'd heard about the society through progressive newspapers that had covered Clara's story. The society began hosting weekly tournaments, small affairs at first, then larger as word spread. Clara played in every one, though she made sure to rotate opponents so newcomers had a chance to face her. She won most matches but lost a few too. Margaret proved to be a fierce competitor, and a textile worker named Sarah Chen had a positional style that gave Clara nightmares. The society also started a scholarship program, funded through donations, and Clara suspected a significant anonymous contribution from Adrian. It allowed working women to attend lessons and tournaments without sacrificing wages. Adrian himself became a frequent visitor, though always in the capacity of a supporter rather than a participant. He'd bring chess books for the library, introduce potential donors, and occasionally play exhibition matches that drew crowds and raised money. But he never tried to take credit or assert control. He simply stood beside Clara and helped her build. Their relationship remained undefined, existing in a space between friendship and something more complicated. They spent hours talking about chess, about strategy, about the fight to change minds and institutions. They shared meals, arguments, comfortable silences. But they also maintained careful distance. Clara still lived at the manor house, coming into London for society meetings. Adrian remained at his townhouse, maintaining the appearance of propriety even as rumors swirled about the Duke and the chess player who'd captured his attention. Clara told herself it was practical, strategic, that blurring the lines between their professional partnership and anything personal would only give their critics ammunition. But sometimes, late at night in the manor house library, she'd find herself thinking about the way Adrian looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, the way his voice softened when he said her name, the way his hand had felt in hers the day everything changed. And she'd wonder what would happen if she stopped being practical. The opportunity came sooner than she expected. 1 year after the Westminster tournament, the committee announced a special exhibition match to mark the anniversary of their decision to open competition to women. The match would be between Clara Whitlock and Adrian Blackmore, a rematch of the famous draw, played publicly at the Royal Opera House with proceeds benefiting chess education. It was a spectacle, a publicity stunt, and a very obvious attempt to capitalize on the scandal that had shaken London's chess world. Clara hated the idea immediately. "It's exploitative," she told Adrian when he came to discuss the committee's proposal. They were in the society's main room, late evening after everyone else had gone home. "They're turning our match into entertainment." "Isn't that what chess always is in a way?" Adrian countered. "Performance and strategy combined." "This is different. They're not interested in the game, they're interested in the story. The Duke and the girl who challenged him. The woman who proved herself his equal. You know what I mean." Adrian leaned against a chess table, arms crossed. "What if we played anyway?" "Why would we?" "Because it would be the biggest chess event London has seen in decades. Because the proceeds would fund education programs we both care about. And because—" He paused. "Because I'd like to play you again. Properly this time. No poison, no scandal, no disguises. Just us and the board." Clara felt her resolve waver. The committee would control everything. The venue, the format, the publicity. Then we negotiate, we make demands. We insist on terms that serve our purposes, not theirs. Adrian's eyes gleamed with challenge. "We've already forced them to change once. Why not push further?" Clara found herself smiling despite her reservations. "You're enjoying this." "Immensely, aren't you?" She was, she realized. The fight, the negotiation, the chance to prove once again that women belonged at the highest levels of competition. It was exactly the kind of battle she'd built the society to wage. "All right," she said, "but we do it our way." The negotiations took weeks. Clara and Adrian, backed by the society's board and several influential donors Adrian had cultivated, pushed for unprecedented control over the event. They demanded that half the commentary positions go to women, that ticket sales include a significant number of reduced-price seats for working people, that the Society's scholarship program receive not just a portion of proceeds, but a guaranteed minimum, regardless of attendance. The committee balked at every demand. Clara and Adrian held firm. In the end, they got almost everything they wanted. The match was scheduled for June, giving them 3 months to prepare. Clara threw herself into training with an intensity that worried even Margaret. "You're going to exhaust yourself," Margaret said, finding Clara in the society library at midnight for the third time in a week. "I'm fine. You're playing chess in your sleep. Sarah heard you muttering variations at breakfast yesterday." Clara looked up from the board where she was analyzing one of Adrian's old games. "I need to be ready." "You're already ready. You've always been ready." Margaret sat down across from her. "What are you really afraid of?" Clara wanted to brush off the question, but this was Margaret, brilliant, perceptive Margaret who'd become not just a student, but a friend. "I'm afraid of losing," Clara admitted. "Not the match. I can handle losing a match. But I'm afraid of losing what we've built. If I play badly, if I prove the critics right." "You won't. You don't know that." "I do." Margaret's voice was firm. "Clara, you've beaten some of the best players in England. You've built a society from nothing. You've changed laws and minds and lives. One match doesn't define any of that." "It feels like it might." "Then change how it feels. Stop treating this like a test and start treating it like what it is. A chance to show everyone what you've always known, that you belong at that board, that women belong at every board." Clara sat back, Margaret's words settling over her like a blanket. "When did you get so wise?" she asked. Margaret grinned. "I learned from the best." The night before the match, Clara couldn't sleep. She paced the manor house, moving from room to room, her mind racing through openings and variations and all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. At midnight, she heard a carriage on the drive. She went to the window and saw Adrian climbing down, his coat collar turned up against the spring rain. She met him at the door. "You should be resting," she said. "So should you." He was soaked, his hair dripping, but he smiled. "I thought you might need company." Clara stepped aside to let him in. "I thought you were supposed to be avoiding scandal." "I've decided scandal suits me." He shook water from his coat. "Besides, I'm not here for anything scandalous. I'm here because neither of us should be alone tonight." They ended up in the library. Clara curled in one chair, Adrian in another, a fire crackling between them. They didn't talk about the match or strategy or what tomorrow meant. Instead, Adrian told her about his mother, about learning chess at her knee, about the way she'd made even losing feel like an adventure. Clara told him about the first time she'd beaten Thomas, about the look on her brother's face, surprise and pride mixed together, and how it had made her feel powerful in a way nothing else ever had. They talked until the sky began to lighten, until exhaustion finally pulled them both under. Clara woke hours later to find herself covered with a blanket, Adrian asleep in the chair across from her, his face peaceful in the morning light. She watched him for a moment, this complicated man who'd somehow become essential to everything she was building. And she knew, with sudden clarity, that whatever happened at the match tonight, win, lose, or draw, what she felt for him wasn't going away. The question was whether she was brave enough to do anything about it. The Royal Opera House was packed. Every seat sold, people standing in the aisles, the air electric with anticipation. Clara arrived early, slipping in through a side entrance to avoid the crowds, but she could feel the energy even from the private room where she waited. Margaret had helped her dress. A simple but elegant gown, the color of deep burgundy, her hair pinned up, no disguises or pretense. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman preparing to play the most important chess match of her life. When the door opened, Clara expected an official. Instead, it was Adrian. He wore formal evening attire, impeccably tailored, but his expression was softer than the clothes suggested. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," Clara admitted. "Good. So am I." That surprised her. "Really?" "Clara, I'm about to play a chess match in front of 2,000 people against a woman I—" He stopped, reconsidered. "Against a player I deeply respect. If I'm not nervous, I'm not paying attention." Clara felt her heart skip. "You were going to say something else." "I was." Adrian stepped closer. "But I think we should probably have that conversation after the match, when neither of us is liable to let it affect our play." "That's probably wise." "Clara." He waited until she met his eyes. "However this match goes, whatever happens out there, it doesn't change what you've accomplished. What we've accomplished. You know that, right?" "I'm starting to." "Good," he smiled. "Then let's go play some chess." The walk from the waiting room to the stage felt like miles. Clara heard the crowd before she saw them, a wall of sound that hit her the moment she stepped into the light. 2,000 people on their feet, applauding. Not just polite society applause, real, genuine, thunderous applause. Clara saw women in the crowd, dozens of them, hundreds maybe, wearing burgundy ribbons pinned to their dresses in solidarity. She saw Margaret in the front row, tears streaming down her face. She saw Thomas, and beside him, her mother, who raised a hand in quiet acknowledgement. And she saw the chessboard waiting at center stage, each piece perfectly placed, ready. Adrian walked beside her to the table. They sat. The crowd gradually quieted. The arbiter, a different man than the one who'd presided over the Westminster tournament, Clara noted with satisfaction, stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the exhibition match of the century. Miss Clara Whitlock versus His Grace the Duke of Ashford. The match will be played to conclusion with a 2-hour time control per player. May the best player win. Adrian extended his hand across the board. Clara took it. For the game, he said quietly. For the game, Clara agreed. They released hands, and the match began. Adrian opened with pawn to e4. Clara responded with the Sicilian defense, the same opening she'd used in both their previous encounters. But this time she varied on move 5, leading them into uncharted territory. The game was spectacular. Adrian played with controlled aggression, his attacks sharp and precise. Clara defended brilliantly, finding resources in positions that looked hopeless, turning defense into counterattack with moves that drew gasps from the crowd. They traded pieces, maneuvered for advantage, built and demolished plans with each passing move. An hour passed, then 2. The position grew complex, balanced on a knife's edge. One mistake from either player would tip the scales. On move 37, Clara saw it, a combination that would win her the game. A queen sacrifice that would expose Adrian's king and force checkmate in 11 moves. Her hand hovered over the queen. She could win. Right now, definitively. She could prove beyond any doubt that she was the better player. But as her fingers touched the wooden piece, her mother's queen, the one Clara had been carrying for luck, she thought about Margaret's words. About what this match really meant. It wasn't about proving she was better than Adrian. It was about proving she belonged here. That women belonged here. And a win built on a single brilliant combination, while satisfying, wouldn't change as many minds as something else might. She thought about the draw they'd played at Westminster. How it had said they were equals. How that had mattered more than either of them winning. She thought about the 2,000 people watching, the women wearing burgundy ribbons, the girls in the audience who might see this match and decide to learn chess themselves. And she made a choice. She pulled her hand back from the queen and played a different move. One that kept the position balanced, that extended the game, that made it a conversation rather than a statement. Adrian's eyes flickered to hers, sharp and questioning. She met his gaze steadily. The game continued for another 2 hours. They fought for every inch of the board, neither giving quarter, both playing at the absolute peak of their abilities. And when they finally reached the end game, kings and pawns, neither able to make progress, they both knew what the result would be. On move 81, Adrian offered his hand. Draw? Clara took it. Draw. The crowd erupted, not with disappointment, but with something that sounded like awe. They'd just witnessed 6 hours of chess played at the highest level. They'd seen a woman hold her own against England's champion. They'd seen 2 brilliant minds locked in perfect, respectful combat. And they'd seen that women belonged. Clara and Adrian stood, acknowledging the applause. Then, in a gesture that would be talked about for years, Adrian took Clara's hand and raised it high, presenting her to the crowd not as his opponent, but as his equal. The burgundy-ribboned women in the audience went wild. Afterward, in the chaos of congratulations and interviews and photographers wanting just one more picture, Clara found herself pulled aside by Lord Pemberton. The committee chairman looked older than she remembered, but there was something almost like respect in his eyes. "Miss Whitlock," he said, "on behalf of the committee, I want to thank you for an extraordinary match. Thank you for hosting it. We're also pleased to announce..." He cleared his throat. "Beginning next year, the Westminster tournament will include a women's division, separate but equal competition, with the same prize money and prestige as the men's division." Clara felt something twist in her chest. Separate but equal, Still not truly equal, but it was a step, a significant one. I appreciate that, she said carefully, though I hope eventually the divisions won't be necessary. Pemberton's smile was thin. One battle at a time, Miss Whitlock. Indeed. She found Adrian outside leaning against the opera house wall, still in his formal attire but looking thoroughly exhausted. That was, Clara started, then laughed. I don't even have words for what that was. Extraordinary? Adrian suggested. Terrifying? Exhilarating? All of the above. She leaned against the wall beside him. You saw the combination, didn't you? Move 37? Of course I saw it. It was brilliant. But I didn't play it. No, you didn't. Adrian looked at her. Why? Clara considered the question. Because winning that way, with one brilliant stroke, would have been about me. About proving I was better. But playing for the draw, making it a real match that could have gone either way, that was about something bigger. About showing we're equals. About showing that women can compete at the highest level. That they deserve to be there not as anomalies or exceptions, but as players. She paused. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. Adrian's voice was soft. You sacrificed the win for the message. I did. That's either the most brilliant thing you've ever done or the most foolish. Probably both, Clara agreed. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the sounds of London's night streets washing over them. Then Adrian said, Earlier, I started to say something. Clara's heart stuttered. You did. I said I was about to play a match against a player I deeply respected, but that's not what I meant to say. No? No. He turned to face her fully, his dark eyes intense. Clara, I'm falling in love with you. I think I have been since the moment you beat me at Westminster and refused to apologize for it. And I know this is complicated. I know we're partners in building something important. I know the society needs to stand on its own without people thinking you're just the Duke's pet project. But I also know. He took a breath. I also know that I don't want to keep pretending what I feel is purely professional respect. Clara's throat went tight. She'd expected this conversation eventually, but hearing the words spoken aloud still stole her breath. Adrian, you don't have to say anything. I'm not asking for promises or commitments or anything that would compromise what you're building. I just needed you to know. Clara looked at him, this brilliant, complicated man who'd risked everything to stand beside her, who'd defended her when he had no reason to, who'd believed in her even when she struggled to believe in herself. And she realized she'd been a coward. She'd faced down lords and committees and an entire system designed to exclude her. She'd walked onto stages in front of thousands of people. She'd played chess knowing one wrong move could destroy everything she'd built, but she'd been afraid to acknowledge what she felt for the man standing in front of her. I'm falling in love with you too, she said quietly. Adrian's eyes widened. Clara, I've been trying not to, trying to keep everything separate and professional and safe. But I can't. And I don't want to anymore. She took a breath. But Adrian, I can't be someone's wife. I can't give up the society or the work, or I'm not asking you to. He stepped closer. I don't want you to be anything other than what you are. I don't want to own you or control you or fit you into some predetermined role. I just want... He paused, searching for words. I just want to be part of your life, however that works. That's not how the world expects things to work. Then we'll change the world's expectations. Adrian smiled. We're rather good at that, I've noticed. Clara laughed, feeling something loosen in her chest. We are, aren't we? So what do you say? Can I court you in the most unconventional, improper way possible? Take you to chess matches instead of balls? Argue about strategy over dinner? Support your work while you support mine? That sounds perfect, Clara said. And then, because she was tired of being careful and practical and afraid, she kissed him. It was brief, chaste, by any standard, but it felt like a revolution. When they pulled apart, Adrian was grinning. That was improper? I was going to say wonderful. That too. They walked back to the society together, hand in hand, and Clara felt lighter than she had in months. Maybe years. The fight wasn't over. There would be more battles, more committees to face, more minds to change. The women's division at Westminster was a step, but true equality was still distant. But for tonight, Clara allowed herself to simply exist in this moment, to be happy, to be in love, to be exactly who she was without apology. 3 years later, Clara stood in the main hall of the Whitlock Women's Chess Society, now expanded to 3 locations across London and affiliated societies in Manchester, Edinburgh, and Dublin, and watched as Margaret Ellis won the first women's national championship. The match had been broadcast in newspapers across England. Hundreds of women had competed. Margaret had fought her way through 7 grueling rounds to face Sarah Chen in the final, and the match had been everything Clara could have hoped for: brilliant, strategic, passionate. When Margaret raised the trophy over her head, the hall erupted in cheers. Clara felt Adrian's hand find hers, and she squeezed it tight. They'd been married for 2 years now, a quiet ceremony with only close friends and family, followed by absolutely no changes to their working relationship or Clara's autonomy. Adrian had taken the unusual step of adding a clause to their marriage contract, ensuring Clara retained full control of the society and all her earnings. Society had been scandalized. Clara couldn't have cared less. The Westminster tournament had finally eliminated its gender divisions the previous year, allowing women and men to compete together. Clara had entered and finished in the top 8, not winning, but proving once again that she belonged. More importantly, 12 other women had competed alongside her. The doors were open. Not everywhere, not completely, but enough. After the award ceremony, as the hall gradually emptied and only the closest friends remained, Thomas approached Clara. Her brother had become one of the society's most vocal political advocates, using his position in Parliament to push for equal education opportunities and speaking frequently about the importance of challenging gender restrictions. Their relationship had healed slowly, carefully, but it had healed. "Quite a day," he said. "Quite a few years," Clara corrected. Thomas smiled. "Mother wanted me to tell you she's proud. She would have come herself, but I know." Their father still refused to acknowledge the society or Clara's work. Some wounds took longer to heal than others. "Tell her thank you." "I will." He paused. "For what it's worth, I'm proud too. Of what you've built. Of who you are." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "That means everything." After Thomas left, Clara walked through the empty hall, running her fingers along the chess tables, remembering the first day they'd opened. How terrified she'd been. How uncertain Margaret found her there. "Clara? Everyone's heading to the pub to celebrate. Are you coming?" Clara looked at her protégé. No, her friend and colleague, and smiled. "In a moment. I just need a minute." "Take your time." Alone in the hall, Clara sat down at the table where she'd first taught Margaret an opening variation. She pulled out the wooden queen her mother had given her and set it on the board. She thought about the girl who'd walked into Westminster wearing a disguise, desperate to prove herself. She thought about the woman she'd become, still fighting, still pushing boundaries, but no longer fighting alone. And she thought about all the women and girls who would come after her, who would walk through doors she'd helped pry open, who would never have to hide who they were to pursue what they loved. The work wasn't finished. It might never be finished. But it was started, and that was enough. Adrian appeared in the doorway. "Ready?" Clara stood, pocketing the queen. "Ready." They walked out together into the London evening, leaving the lights on in the hall behind them, a beacon for anyone who needed it. Outside, the city sprawled in all directions, full of possibility and challenge and change. Clara had spent years fighting to prove she belonged. Now she was building a world where everyone did. And in that moment, walking hand in hand with the man she loved, surrounded by the work she'd built and the community she'd helped create, Clara Whitlock felt something she'd never quite felt before. Free. Completely, utterly, impossibly free. And the game, the real game, the one that mattered, was just beginning.